Europe and US accelerate decoupling from China's auto supply chain. Why does De-Sinicization increase dependence? General Motors recently announced a plan to phase out all Chinese components by 2027, only for its US factory to halt production for 3 days due to a sensor shortage from a Chinese supplier. When Tesla switched to a batch of non-Chinese wiring harnesses, the cost per vehicle immediately jumped by 38%, with workers complaining, "It's faster to ship from Shanghai." Why is this dramatic? De-Sinicization campaign by European and US automakers becoming increasingly convoluted? They were the ones who actively initiated the disruption, yet they are the ones panicking. This issue first requires puncturing a central myth. The automotive supply chain is not like building blocks that can be easily dismantled. It is more like an old, century-simmered broth, with China as the dragon bone at the bottom. European and US car companies have been spooning out the flavor for decades, and now, attempting to remove the bone, they discover that the essence has already permeated every part of the soup. Take vehicle-grade chip diodes, for instance. 3 out of 10 globally are manufactured by China's Nexperia. BMW's radars and Mercedes-Benz gearboxes rely on it to function. Even more paradigm-shifting is the notion that the West thought China only produced screws, failing to realize that we have long held the key to the lifegate of the new energy vehicle (NEV) sector. 68% of the global power battery capacity is in China. When it comes to the rare earth processing technology required for permanent magnet motors, we can confidently claim to be the world leader. The cost of building a power battery in the US is 40% higher than in China. The time it takes Europe to establish one battery production line is enough for China to build 3, complete with supporting facilities. This decoupling drama is not a simple choosing sides scenario. It is a life or death struggle for the global manufacturing industry. Today, we will analyze the data and case studies to understand why the De-Sinicization calculations of European and US car manufacturers are crackling on their abacus but leading to increasing losses. Crucially, we must comprehend why China's automotive supply chain has become an unavoidable entity. Police call it the accidental halt that spooked Western automakers. The fuse that collectively panicked European and US automakers was the unexpected shutdown of a Chinese company. After Nexperia, a subsidiary of Wingitech Technology, was cut off from wafer supplies by the Netherlands, citing national security concerns, 3 production lines at BMW's Munich factory immediately stalled, and Stellantis Group's gearbox module inventory was only enough to last 12 days. The American Automotive Association urgently warned the White House a further cutoff could lead to a collective collapse of the U.S. auto industry within weeks. This is not an overreaction. Nexperia's vehicle-grade diodes command a global market share of over 30%. Components ranging from Mercedes-Benz in-car radar to Volkswagen's body control systems are dependent on its parts. Ironically, while the Netherlands blocked Nexperia's wafers, European and US automakers could not find a substitute. The lead time for similar Japanese products is 6 months, and the quotation from a German domestic company is 2.3 times that of Nexperia. Only then did Western automakers realize they had already been choked by the Chinese supply chain. The essence of this farce is the aftermath of deindustrialization in Europe and the US. In the 1990s, they outsourced low to mid-end production, reaping cost dividends but hollowing out their industrial base. Now, attempting to reconstruct the supply chain, they find it difficult to even manufacture a qualified automotive wiring harness. Chinese companies produce harnesses at 40% lower cost than foreign rivals, with a 30% shorter response cycle. Restarting local production lines in the West requires 6 months just for worker training. Decoupling is not a solution, it is smashing their own rice bowl, ultimately leading to greater difficulties. This is the law of global industrial division of labor, which no one can escape. Money with wings, the myth of manufacturing reshoring, and the $12,000 price tag. The manufacturing reshoring that Europe and the US have promoted for years is fundamentally a false proposition in the automotive industry. The US is the most typical example. When the North American Free Trade Agreement took effect in 1994, the U.S. domestic auto manufacturing sector had 282,000 employees. By 2018, that number had dropped to 234,000, a 17% reduction. Massive production segments were relocated to Mexico, and local factories lack complete engine production lines. Today, 60% of the U.S. auto industry's parts rely on imports, with 11% of the core components coming from China. German automakers are faring no better. To replace Chinese semiconductors, BMW forced the adoption of products from STMicroelectronics, resulting in a threefold surge in new vehicle failure rates and a 200% month-on-month increase in after-sales complaints. Volkswagen attempted to use body structural parts manufactured in India but found that the yield rate was only 60% of that of its Chinese factories. The rework cost alone consumed a 3-point margin of profit. While they preach supply chain autonomy, their actions are telling. The German Association of the Automotive Industry privately calculated that replacing Chinese parts increased the average cost per European vehicle by $12,000. The key to manufacturing reshoring is the completeness of the industrial system, not political slogans. When Europe and the US moved production abroad, they did not plan a fallback. Now, in their rush to rebuild, they find that even the supporting steel and electronics companies are gone. It's like building a house. Blueprints are useless without bricks, tiles, and labor. The West now has the blueprints but finds the brick kilns have been dismantled and the workers have left. Forcing reshoring under these conditions will only be a loss-making vanity project, ultimately dragging down domestic industries. Battery China's unassailable dominance in the new energy race. In the NEV sector, Europe and the US are trailing China by more than one length. Global lithium-ion battery shipments are projected to reach 2,200 GWh by 2025, with China accounting for over 68%, and this figure is still rising. The US aims to support its domestic battery industry through the Inflation Reduction Act, yet the core equipment for battery production at the Tesla Texas factory, the coating machine, still has to be purchased from Shenzhen. The Chinese-made coater has 15% higher precision than its US counterparts, and is 30% lower in price. Europe's NEV infrastructure is even more dire. Germany's charging pile density is less than 1/5 of China's, and grid modernization is lagging. Even if they can manufacture electric vehicles, consumers lack the ability to charge them. More critically, there is the patent barrier. Global annual patent applications for lithium-ion batteries exceed 120,000, with China accounting for over 60%. For cutting-edge technologies like solid-state batteries and silicon-carbon anodes, our patent count is double the total of Europe and the US combined. The difficulty for the West to bypass China in developing NEVs is akin to having to reinvent the light bulb. Competition in NEVs is fundamentally a competition across the entire industrial chain. China has formed an industry cluster, from lithium mining and material processing to battery manufacturing, that is impossible for others to replicate. Europe and the US may have lithium mines but lack processing capabilities. They have technical drawings but lack mass production experience. Catching up will require at least 10 years. The more they attempt to decouple, the more their own shortcomings will be exposed, ultimately leaving them far behind in the NEV revolution. This is the penalty of industrial law. Shield the advanced strategy. Made in Mexico, Chinese technology. Faced with Western blockades, Chinese enterprises are no longer passively taking hits but are actively breaking the deadlock. Zhongyuan Internal Combustion Engine Parts (CYP) has specialized in cylinder liners for decades, from supplying Cummins to becoming a global leader. It is now building factories in Thailand to be closer to the Southeast Asian market and circumvent tariffs, with its 2025 overseas revenue reaching 483 million renminbi. Chongqing Vehicle Company is more direct. It invested $50 million to build a lighting factory in Mexico, specifically to serve General Motors' North American supply chain, packaging, Chinese technology. As made in Mexico, there is a growing group of such companies. Wakan Group manufactures aluminum die castings in Mexico, Topu Group builds interior factories, and Shanghai Intelligent Controls has also established its electronic control module production line. They are not fleeing China. They are keeping the roots of the supply chain domestically while extending their production tentacles right to the doorstep of Europe and the US. The data is most persuasive. China's auto parts export value saw a counter-trend growth of 5.3% in 2025. Those European and US automakers crying for de-Sinicization are still buying Chinese components, just with a different country of origin label. The response of Chinese companies directly exposes the hypocrisy of Western decoupling. They are not opposed to made in China, but to Chinese-owned. When Chinese companies build factories overseas and meet their policy requirements with localized production, European and US automakers lose their grounds for refusal. This is not compromise. It is a more sophisticated game of chess. We retain technology and profit while avoiding trade barriers, whereas Western automakers must pay higher costs for political correctness. In this zero-sum game, the scales of victory are already tilting toward us. Chart decreasing the final truth: decoupling is a double loss. The ultimate truth of this supply chain game is that the global auto industry is already an intertwined community, and decoupling is a double loss. After Tesla's US factory switched to non-Chinese parts, the cost per vehicle rose by 38%, while sales fell by 15%. BMW's replacement of Chinese semiconductors increased after sales costs by 200 million renminbi. Conversely, China's NEV exports grew by 28% in 2025, and BYD's market share in Europe surpassed Volkswagen's. European and US automakers are in a dilemma. No decoupling means they fail politically. Decoupling means they fail commercially and face massive losses. They cite national security, but are actually trying to protect the vested interests of traditional internal combustion engine vehicles. However, the tide of the NEV revolution cannot be stopped. China has established a firm foothold in the upstream of the industrial chain, possessing a commanding voice in batteries, electric motors, and smart driving. The attempt by the West to reverse the situation through decoupling is akin to sailing against the current. The law of global manufacturing has never been about block confrontation, but about efficiency is king. The rise of the Chinese supply chain is not due to low-price competition, but to its comprehensive advantage in efficiency across the entire chain, from R&D to production. The West's attempt to violate this law will inevitably come at a cost. As their cars become more expensive and their quality deteriorates, consumers will naturally vote with their feet. After all, no one is willing to pay an extra tens of thousands of dollars for political correctness. That is the hardest core market logic.